Hi, Studio Recapped here. Today, we're going to talk about a movie called Miller's Girl in the drama genre. Spoiler alert is on. Take care. The story begins with a girl named Cairo Sweet, a teenager living in the hills of Lowell in a small village. Her parents are lawyers who are always traveling, leaving Cairo to live alone for a long time. She's an avid reader, diving into works by famous authors. Cairo has always been waiting for love. To get to school, Cairo walks through the forest and attends Jonathan Miller's writing class. When Jonathan gives her a reading list, Cairo casually mentions that she's already read every book on it. At that moment, another girl, Winnie Black, enters the class. She's Cairo's close friend and the one who recommended this class to her. The two students, having arrived early, decide to go out for a snack. Meanwhile, Jonathan notices his own book among Cairo's collection, which intrigues him a little. Just then, Boris Fillmore, the physics teacher, walks into the classroom and starts teasing Jonathan. Boris has a reputation for flirting with his female students. Jonathan Miller was once a writer who had published a book in the past. However, it didn't receive much attention, leading him to step away from the world of writing. Meanwhile, his wife, Beatrice, is a successful author. Jonathan proudly tells Beatrice that one of his students owns his book. He tries to spend some quality time with her, but Beatrice is often too busy or tied up on the phone. Jonathan confides in Boris about the growing distance in his relationship with Beatrice, admitting that it's starting to bother him. At that moment, Cairo shows up. Both Jonathan and Boris are taken aback by her behavior. She's bold, fearless, and doesn't act like an average teenager. Later, we see Winnie trying to flirt with Boris. She believes that, despite the 20-year age gap, Boris is a good match for a relationship and can help her get better grades through their connection. Cairo witnesses this scene and later asks Boris why he acts that way. This moment shifts Cairo's perspective on her relationship with Jonathan. She starts thinking less about being intelligent and, with Winnie's influence, becomes interested in being attractive as well. Feeling like her life has been unremarkable so far, Cairo decides it's time for a change as meaningful as a good story worth writing, perhaps a gripping tale about a student losing her innocence. Winnie tells Cairo that Jonathan looks at her differently from the other students and insists that he likes her. The next day, Jonathan asks Cairo to meet after class, saying he wants to give her the midterm assignment in advance. Cairo is supposed to choose her favorite author and write a short story in their style. That evening, Jonathan, Beatrice, and Boris head to a bar, where Winnie surprises them by coming to their table to take their order, showing off her playful side. Beatrice initially suspects that Winnie is the student Jonathan is attracted to. Here, we catch a glimpse of Beatrice's jealousy and her growing sensitivity toward Cairo. Jonathan and Cairo attend a poetry reading event together, marking a significant step in their closeness. They start discussing personal interests and even share a cigarette. Cairo begins to feel like she's falling in love with her teacher. From the next day, Cairo starts dressing more attractively, which even Boris notices. Beatrice suggests to Jonathan that they take a trip together. He eagerly agrees, as he desperately needs some alone time with his wife. The following day, Cairo tells Jonathan that her favorite author is Henry Miller, and she's chosen him for her project. This was a challenging task since Cairo needed to emulate Henry Miller's writing style without copying his content. On top of that, Miller's works are erotic, making them difficult for everyone to fully grasp. Winnie, who overheard their conversation, tells Cairo that her real intention was clearly to seduce Jonathan and that choosing this author was just an excuse. At the same time, Boris walks in and, during a chat with Winnie, gives her his number. From then on, they start texting each other. Jonathan, who had packed his things in a rush, realizes he accidentally took Cairo's phone. He heads to her house to return it. When he arrives, a romantic scene unfolds, with heavy rain pouring down. They get close and share a kiss. Jonathan and Beatrice's trip is cancelled due to her work commitments. Meanwhile, Jonathan receives an email from Cairo. It's her midterm assignment. The story is entirely erotic, detailing Cairo and Jonathan being together. She writes it with such realistic details that Jonathan loses himself while reading it. The next day, Jonathan tells Cairo that her story is awful, and they get into an argument. Cairo feels heartbroken and rejected. From the change in her demeanor, it's clear she's plotting revenge. Cairo and Winnie go out for drinks. Once they're intoxicated, Cairo, following her plan, manipulates the situation so that compromising photos are exchanged in the chat between Winnie and Boris. Meanwhile, Jonathan goes home and discusses Cairo's assignment and their argument with Beatrice. Beatrice's reaction shows she doesn't fully believe Jonathan and questions whether something actually happened between him and Cairo. At the same time, Boris, who is at Jonathan's house, is shocked to see the photos Winnie sent. Cairo leaves her writing where the principal can find it, sparking drama since everyone assumes her story is more like a confession than a fictional tale. The next day, Cairo doesn't attend class because the principal calls her in. She shares details of what happened. The principal also calls Jonathan in for a separate discussion. After speaking with both of them, the principal concludes that Jonathan is at fault and fires him for breaking the rules. Boris tells Jonathan, "You never knew where to draw the line." However, Boris's silence also stems from the incriminating photos exchanged with Winnie. Boris distances himself from Jonathan and leaves. Jonathan brings the issue up with Beatrice. Beatrice, fully convinced that her husband is guilty, refuses to believe his words. Their argument escalates into a massive fight, leading Beatrice to decide on separation. She sees Jonathan as a lying, pathetic loser. It's worth noting that Winnie, who testified against Jonathan and backed up Cairo's claims, confronts Cairo after his dismissal. She realizes she was betrayed by her best friend. In the end, the story concludes with Cairo's success and her satisfaction in ruining Jonathan's life and career.